The apocalypse started on a Tuesday. Not with fire. Not with war. Not with aliens blowing up the White House. Just weird shit. People woke up and their reflections didn't match. Buildings stretched too high, too thin. Street signs whispered when you walked past. And some people just disappeared. Like poof. Gone. I should have known things were bad when I stepped outside and the sky was the wrong color. It wasn't blue. It wasn't gray. It was, I don't know, like a color I'd never seen before but somehow recognized. Like when you hear a song you don't remember but you know all the words. Anyway, that was day 1. By day 3, reality was drunk off its ass. Gravity started working on a freelance basis. Some people floated away like balloons. Others got stuck to the ground. The moon got way too close, like a nosy neighbor leaning over the fence. And the sun? Well, there were 2 of them now. By day 5, most people were either dead, missing, or existentially broken. Not me, though. I had a plan. Well, plan is a strong word. More like a stolen shopping cart, a backpack full of canned goods, and a gun I found on a priest. Listen. He wasn't using it. Probably. The important thing is, I wasn't sticking around. See, there was a rumor going around. A safe place. A town that hadn't been touched by all this Willy Wonka acid trip bullshit. It was 500 miles east. So that's where I was headed. Just me, my cart, and the rapidly deteriorating rules of reality. And let me tell you, this road trip was gonna suck. Day 7. The tree started talking. Not like whispering creepy shit, just small talk. The ocean was now inland and very, very angry about it. I found a dog. The dog spoke perfect English. He was also kind of an asshole. Day 10. Met a guy with no face. He played the banjo. Pretty good, actually. Sun winked at me. I flipped it off. I think I hurt its feelings. The ground became water, but only when I wasn't looking at it. Dog stole my last can of beans. I will never forgive him. Day 15. Ran into a cult. They worship a giant floating eye. The eye tried to recruit me. I told it to fuck off. I am now being hunted by an omniscient celestial entity. On the bright side, found a Snickers bar. Day 20. The road turned into a Mobius strip. I walked for 3 days before realizing I was going in a loop. The Snickers bar had a pulse. I ate it anyway. Reality started cracking. Literally. There are holes in the world. I looked into one. Something looked back. By day 25, I was starting to enjoy myself. I mean, sure, existence was breaking down like a shitty bootleg DVD, but at this point I'd seen so much mind-melting horror that I was kind of numb to it. So when I finally reached the safe place, I wasn't even surprised that it was worse. See, everyone was fine here. Too fine. No monsters. No sky meltdowns. No whispering shadows. Just people. Smiling. Perfect. Too perfect. I watched a woman burn her hand on a stove. No reaction. No flinch. Just a big, frozen smile. I watched a man get hit by a car. He got back up, bones twisted wrong, and kept walking like nothing happened. Then a kid ran up to me. Big, dead eyes. He grabbed my hand, and his fingers kept going. Stretching, wrapping around my wrist like rope. He leaned in close. "You don't belong here." I yanked away, heart hammering. The whole town was staring at me now. Still smiling. Still wrong. And that's when I realized this wasn't a safe place. This was where reality went to die. And I had just walked right in. I think I witnessed a ritual killing last night. I've been living in Ohio for about 13 years now. Was 13 when we moved here, and it's been about as boring and uneventful as you'd expect rural Ohio to be. Cornfields at both ends of the street, houses spread out with plenty of land, chicken coops, horse stables, being woken up to the echoing crack of what is surely a neighbor firing off rounds at a haystack or cans, and so on. It's not even a very religious area either. Just a lot of wannabe country folk who live in Ohio, and one neighbor who named their son Cameron with a K so that his initials would be KKK. I wish I was kidding, but I've seen the birth certificate. Anyways, that was just to help you understand where I was living, as it makes what I witnessed 29 hours ago now feel that much more out of place. 3 a.m. on a Friday night in rural Ohio may as well be used as a filming location for zombie movies due to how quiet and desolate everything around you feels. You may hear one car drive by in the span of a night, and none of the neighbors are very active, at least not usually. Last night, however, they had guests over in the evening around 6 p.m., and I thought absolutely nothing of it. Why would I? Certainly wasn't the first time they had company, but it was peculiar when nobody left as the hours ticked by. At midnight, when I normally went to bed, I happened to look out my bedroom window, which has a view of their lengthy driveway, and noticed that all 8 cars were still there. It wasn't necessarily strange, but they weren't mid-20s people like me who could just be drinking and laughing their asses off. The couple who lived there were probably in their late 50s or early 60s, and most of the guests that I saw were all around the same age range. I wasn't particularly tired last night, so I threw on my headphones and played Pokemon on my Switch for about 2 hours or so, basically until I started to yawn and feel tired. After turning my Switch off and putting in my headphones away, I happened to glance out my window and once again noticed that every car was still in my neighbor's driveway. However, something was happening out there now. For starters, a few of the men circled around the trunk of a black SUV, talking amongst themselves as they were looking inside and gesturing to something. I didn't have any thoughts about the matter yet, but then one of them suddenly cocked back and threw a fist into the trunk. I couldn't see who or what was punched, but moments later I saw 2 of them drag a large black duffel bag out of the trunk, and they slowly carried it inside. This is when my stomach began to twist into knots. In hindsight, I should have just continued being the oblivious individual I was and turned away to go to bed, but I found myself drawn to whatever they were doing. Was I witnessing a crime in real time? Was I getting too invested in a bunch of old people hanging out on a Friday night when I was home alone? Who could say really? For the next half hour, my eyes peeked through the shut blinds of my window, just watching neighbor's house intently. I saw a few shadows moving past the windows of lit rooms, but beyond that, there wasn't much exciting or intriguing. I then saw the backyard become illuminated by those cheap tiki torches you can buy at Home Depot being lit by 2 of the women who came outside. They were lighting the torches in a circle. If I had to guess, a circle about 9 feet in diameter, but it was hard to know for sure from above 60 yards away. The rest of the crowd inside the house slowly began to fill the backyard, and I noticed something that made my skin crawl. They were all wearing white robes. They looked thin like lace or silk, rather than thick and plush like bathrobes or something more regal. This all felt way too weird for me, and the little voice in the back of my head that's way smarter than I am was telling me to just stop being curious and go to bed. But curiosity was calling to me like the Green Goblin mask, and I couldn't pull my eyes away from their yard. Soon they all stood in a circle amidst the tiki torches, each person standing in between 2 of them, holding hands in that circle. They all looked down towards the ground, but at the time I couldn't see what they were looking at or what they were saying. I was never good at reading lips. So in my infinite wisdom, I threw on a jacket and my shoes, ignoring the fact that I was still wearing shorts, and as quietly as I could, I slipped out my backyard door. I was very thankful for the fact that we never bought one of those motion sensor lights for the backyard, only the front door. I carefully scanned the ground around me as I approached a wide row of bushes that my mom liked to keep trimmed in the yard. It was almost a perfect divide between our property and theirs, and it allowed for me to hide behind them yet still see through enough at my neighbors. I wasn't yet close enough to hear exactly what they were saying. I could only really hear the mumbling sounds of words, but it became evident they were chanting something in near perfect unison with one another, all while their eyes remained looking downward into what I could now see with a large hole. The chanting went on for what felt like an eternity, but in reality was maybe close to 10 minutes. That's still a lot of time to be chanting, but on a cold night where you're at least partially terrified of what you're witnessing, even a few seconds feels like a painstaking eternity. What followed the chanting is something that makes me wish I had just called the police last night, or even this morning. As the chanting died down, the group began to hum in unison as two of the men went back into the house, the same two men who carried the duffel bag inside from the car. They exited the house a couple minutes later carrying that same duffel bag, then dropping it to their feet with a hefty thud right before the hole. One of them bent over and unzipped it. Then they both hoisted the bag into the air, turned it over, and watched with such a grotesque lack of care on their faces as the body of a young woman toppled out and landed in the hole with another impactful thud. I couldn't tell much about the woman, but she didn't look to be more than a couple years within my age. She had blonde hair and for some reason was only wearing black underwear as they threw her into the hole. Was she alive? I had no idea at the time. When I get nervous, I tend to chew on the side of my gums in my mouth, and as I watched all of this unfold, my molars were practically about to chew through the flesh of my inner mouth, nearly breaking skin and causing me to bleed. Fear hit me with the weight of a car at that very moment, the fact that I was witnessing this, and they were so casually doing this on our little street. I was struggling to breathe. I didn't want to watch anymore. I just couldn't. I remained crouched as I slowly began to creep back in the direction of my back door, keeping my eyes in the direction of my neighbors, just in case one of them happened to be looking around and accidentally saw me. At least I would know it. My path back to the door was a bit off from the one I took to the bushes originally, and I ended up accidentally kicking over a water bucket we used to water flowers. I had no clue if they heard it or not, but I didn't want to be a deer in headlights if they did, so I threw myself onto the grass and stayed as flat as I could. It helps that I was wearing a black coat and black shorts. I prayed to whatever god or deity could hear me that I wouldn't be seen, and I laid there for several minutes. I didn't move an inch. I barely took breaths, just to reduce the likelihood that they may see me. When I finally slowly looked up, they were gone from the backyard, and I let up the heaviest, softest sigh you can imagine. I looked around for a moment just to make sure they weren't circling me or something crazy, and fortunately I saw their shadows moving around inside the house. They hadn't seen me. I was so relieved. I gently moved back to a crouching position, opened my back door slowly, and practically threw myself inside before slamming the deadbolt. That was perhaps the worst 20-ish minutes of my life. I wish I had just gone to sleep so that I never had to witness any of this. When I got back to my bedroom, unfortunately I was able to see the backyard from my window, and out of the corner of my eye I saw that the tiki torches were no longer lit, but something in the yard was burning. I could see faint sparks from a fire popping up, and a growing cloud of smoke bubbled up into the air. This drained the color from my face and the life from my body. Alive or not, they set that poor woman on fire. I was horrified and drained by that point, as it was almost 5 a.m. now. I tossed my coat onto the floor and dove into bed, but I could not fall asleep. I kept zoning out and sort of daydreaming, witnessing nightmarish events where I saw the woman in that hole burning, screaming, calling my name, all as they watched me with abyssal black eyes. I laid in bed in a semi-comatose state until almost 11 a.m., when I exhaustedly dragged myself out of bed and took a shower. When I came downstairs to make the breakfast of champions, a toasted bagel with cream cheese and a stiff drink of whiskey, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I assumed it was a text from one of my friends or perhaps one of my parents checking on me since I hadn't said anything to them all morning. I wish it was something that simple and carefree. However, it was a notification from a new group chat I was a part of. Most of the numbers I didn't recognize, but I knew my parents' numbers were both in there. It was a large group text started by the neighbors next door, inviting my family and most of the houses on our street to join them for a barbecue tonight. They said they spent all night and day preparing barbacoa. I threw open my sink immediately, and I've been barricaded in my bedroom ever since. I have the windows completely closed. I haven't dared to peek out at the neighbors or their barbacoa. There's something pretending to be Elliot. I should clarify, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. I honestly hadn't thought about Elliot in years. I'm not sure why I'm even writing this down. I just don't know what else to do. Our house is pretty old. It was built back in the early 1900s, but we've renovated since we moved here when I was young, about 20 years ago. So it's not creepy anyway, but we joke that it's haunted. I remember years ago, my sister claimed she saw a ghost. What do you mean? She shrugged as if it was nothing. There was a little boy in a red shirt in the bathroom. I thought it was Charlie, so I told him to hurry up and get in the car, then he was gone. Charlie is my younger brother. She told me this about a decade ago when he would have been around 5, and I remember being fascinated with the story. It feels a bit silly now, but I was 12 and a weird kid, so I went ghost hunting in my bathroom. I never found anything. Not surprising, as my only equipment was a toy net I had taken from some poor kid at school. I can't remember what I thought that would do against the ghost of a 5-year-old, but it made sense at the time. It was a few years before I thought about it again, when my younger sister Alana mentioned that she had seen the boy in the red shirt as well, although it was many years before she told me. It was never scary, just a fun story to tell to friends at a sleepover to freak them out, telling them the house was haunted. Still, it stuck with me. I decided to call him Elliot. It seemed to fit the short description I had, and the ghost story got more details the more I told it. A little boy named Elliot, who lived in the house in 1920, he drowned in a mine nearby and still wanders around his old house a century later. I wonder if I created him. Neither of my sisters ever saw Elliot again. They said they never felt scared or in danger when they had, so I figured that if he was real, he was a harmless ghost that disappeared well over a decade ago. I got older, forgot about the haunted house story, and the supposed sighting of this little boy, and life moved on. At least I thought it did. A few weeks ago, the floorboards in the corner of my room creaked. This was nothing new. It was an old house and a windy night. There was bound to be some creepy noises. But something about this was different. My blood ran cold and I thought my heart would explode, even if only for a split second. I didn't know why, but I just felt uncomfortable. Not knowing what else to do, I made my dog stay in my room with me and just went to bed. 2 days later, I had forgotten about it, until again, I felt a deep sense of discomfort, of just general wrongness. I couldn't figure out what it was for a minute, sitting at my desk on edge and listening for any noise, neck prickling when I recognized it. Something was watching me. This happened for about a week. Every now and then I would feel it. The air would grow stale, the crickets go quiet, and I felt the now familiar uneasiness. When I told my friends, they claimed I was being haunted, telling me to move out, claiming they would never step foot in my house again. I'm sure many of you might say the same, leave and never come back, but you have to understand my mindset at the time. This was the house I grew up in. I had never seen or heard anything wrong. The only unnatural thing that had happened in the 20 years of living here was the supposed sighting of a harmless 5-year-old ghost who had disappeared long ago. I was in my room. There was nothing scary about it any other time. Cheap fairy lights strung up and posters on the walls. A few moments of discomfort wasn't enough to send me running. Besides, I couldn't afford to move out. I was struggling through art school, living at my parents' house on a wage of 2 shifts a week at the news agency up RHE Road. This wasn't a horror movie, just an odd feeling every now and then. After about a week and a half of the unsettling feelings becoming increasingly more common, I woke up at some time in the night while my dog growling at the corner of the room. I didn't think much of it, still half asleep, until I turned on the light to calm her down. There was someone hiding under the floorboards. I don't know how I knew. Nothing seemed to be there at all, yet somehow I could almost see it. It was big, and it was still, and it was watching me. I stayed on the couch for days after that, and every night I could feel it. Silent, hiding, watching. I felt awful. I couldn't sleep more than an hour at a time, couldn't shake the feeling, couldn't stop staring at my closed bedroom door. It was constant after that, its eyes on me wherever I was in the house, and I jumped at every small noise around me, waiting for it to climb out of the floor and get me. I was beginning to think I was crazy, so I went to my doctor, explaining how I was being watched, shuddering just thinking about it. I'm not sure if it was the bags under my eyes or my frantic tone, but she spoke in long words about the effects of sleep deprivation and sent me home with a prescription for sleeping pills. I must have convinced myself it was only that, returned to my room that night feeling fine, took the pill and slept in my own bed for the first time in days. That night, for the first time, I saw it. My dog was growling from the door, and crouched in the corner was a crude attempt at a human form. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared in horror at this thing in the corner. The arms and legs were too long, bent unnaturally to press itself down as flat as possible. It looked like a body fallen from a building, a broken form twisting its head back against the floor and staring with unblinking eyes. I don't know how long I sat petrified, unable to take my eyes off it. It might have been minutes, might have been hours, but I felt like I had spent days staring into those blank, empty eyes in the darkness. I don't know what happened next, if I had fallen asleep or fainted, but the sun was up and it was hidden again, watching motionless from under the floor. I left the room the second I could get my muscles moving again, mind racing as I tried to comprehend what the fuck I had seen. Had some malnourished hobo hidden away in my room while I avoided it? Was it some sleep paralysis from medication? I made my dad check the crawl space under my bedroom, leaving out the part about the humanoid creature, and he returned covered in dust and coughing. No one was there, no one had been there for ages. For the first time in years, I slept in my parents' room that night. They seemed confused when I asked, but set up a mattress with only a few concerned glances towards me. The light stayed on. My mom snored loudly, and it was in the corner again. It looked even more uncanny in the light. The skin was pale and stretched over limbs. Its face didn't fit quite right, like a mask with dead eyes. The clothes were dirty and too small. I could see ribs rise and fall too fast under a shrunken red shirt. It was trying to look like a child. Band-aids on the bony knees bent under its body, bruised rosy cheeks and missing front teeth. It was pretending to be Elliot. It didn't go away when the sun came up, when my parents got ready and went to work, when Charlie put a bowl of cereal next to my makeshift bed, when he replaced it hours later with lunch. It didn't look away, it didn't blink, it didn't leave. It stared from the corner with its mouth slightly open and its body contorted and pressed to the carpet. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I didn't look away, and neither did he. I was at the doctor's office. It was under the desk. I was in the car. It was in the back seat. People tried to speak me to me. It stared at open mouth with a heaving chest and distorted face. The sigh thing trying to look like a ghost boy I never saw, inching closer by the DI without moving a muscle. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to make it go away. If anyone has experienced something similar to the sigh, please help me. It's been weeks. It won't stop looking at me.